Today, we're going to show you how you're using ChatGPT o1 completely wrong. You're treating it like a dumb model, and it is so much more than that. We're going to break down why you would use it, how you would use it, and we're going to show you how it can save you hundreds of hours a month and literally 5x your output. You will not believe what you are about to see. We're joined by Sully Omar, who's the founder of AutoGrid, which is an AI-first spreadsheet startup, and he is giving us a masterclass in how to use o1 to get remarkable output for your business. Let's get into today's episode.
One of the things I think that you've done, which is what I think people should think about in terms of agents to wrap their head around is, so when you think about your product, you actually have like these micro agents that complete these tasks autonomously, but they're not like doing all of your customer support or doing all of your sales. They're like, you have an agent per column to fill out a piece of data, which I think is a really good example of where I do see autonomous agents being able to do work in 2025. I think when people think about autonomous agents, they're being told it's going to do all of your sales, do all of your customer support, do all of your marketing. And I don't agree with that. I think you're going to have agents with human in the loop doing that. But I think your product is a good example where you do have these micro agents, and like an agent per column is like a really good example where it owns like one piece of data. And so it's a good example, I think, of like where I do think you actually do really see autonomous agents own the entirety of like that task.
And the reason we actually did that was because we previously had tried to build these autonomous agents, and the success rate was like, the example I like to give is, imagine every time you open Slack and like 25% of the time it just didn't work, right? Like you would not use Slack. And for agents, it's like there's that threshold of like, okay, if it doesn't work every third iteration, it's basically useless. And that's why we took that approach of like, why don't we just give an agent a very, very specific micro task that there's like almost a zero chance it messes up. And then you can kind of take those and kind of get them to work together. So you have 100 of those or whatever, 1,000 of those. And it becomes a lot easier to do these sort of like long multi-step tasks where each one, like you said, it's like a micro agent focusing on one little thing. And then you build a product around that lets you sort of have them work together to like solve a more difficult, broader task.
Sam Altman talked about this. He basically said where he said one of the weak points of LLM models is if you ask it to do something 10,000 times, it will likely get a lot of those things wrong. Like the reliability is just not there. And so if an agent is going to replace an employee, it's not a great experience if you tell that agent to do 5 tasks that day and then it comes back and says, oh, I did these 2 and then these other 3 I just decided to do something completely random instead. You would probably sack that employee.
That's like the one thing that I think some people, when they get excited about autonomous agents, they forget that like, okay, maybe 3, 4 iterations work, but like, yeah, like you said, like if like the 7th, 8th, and 9 somewhat work, and then maybe the 10th does work, like you would not hire that employee.
No.
You would put them on a performance plan, and you'd be like, hey, you got to fix this.
Yeah.
And I think the autonomous agents, they need smarter models, is what I've kind of deduced from just playing with them. And I think the reasoning models that we saw from OpenAI was a good step forward. And I think we're going to continually see that trend as like the thinking models get better, they'll think for longer, and they'll be able to do these sort of more difficult tasks with a higher success rate. But I still think we're a couple of generations of models away from that. Even now, though, like there's the things that you can do with something like o1 Pro compared to even 6 months ago is just like mind blowing. Like the things that I've been able to do at my company, it just like, to me, feels like a genuine, used properly, like a genuine senior engineer. Like I use it to code a lot. I use it to look at my KPIs, my metrics, like. And I think the one thing I've noticed is that it's used very differently than how you would normally use, like a regular model like ChatGPT or Claude. And then I start to notice that a lot of people prompt it in a very sort of suboptimal way where they're expecting like, hey, I'm going to ask it a quick question and a quick response, which is not the right way to use it. The right way to use it is sort of like what I like to call is like building context. So grabbing all of the piece of information, sitting there and thinking like, what am I going to ask this model to do for me, right? Like as if it's like a person, right? You're not going to just tell a person, hey, and it's not going to say, hey, right? You're going to sit there. You're going to probably be on maybe like a Zoom call and you're going to have a very long conversation. And I really like to see like these like thinking models as that as well. So
yeah, can we go into that? Because I think there was a lot of hype around OpenAI's o1 model, and especially in engineering and science and academics. And I think the average person was like, oh, I guess this is cool, but it's for stuff that I don't do and I don't kind of know how to do it. I'm just over here doing like my basic stuff in ChatGPT. Could you maybe like demystify this? Give us some prompting secrets. Like, how should the average person, if you're just like, hey, I work in marketing or I work in sales, like what should I be doing with O1 and how should I be interacting with a reasoning-based model versus a maybe non-reasoning traditional based model?
What I did is I actually created this, what I like to call internally, and we reference this at our company as well, is it's like the 3-tiered system to using all these models. So there's like, I don't know, God knows how many models, over 50 now, but I boiled it down to these core ones, which is Claude, Gemini, and OpenAI/ChatGPT. So the system is pretty simple. You have 3 tiers. You have your working models, which are the ones that are really cheap, really fast. So you have things like Gemini Flash, GPT-4o Mini, Haiku. These are like sort of dumb. They're not like the smartest models, and I wouldn't ask them to do a very difficult task. But if I'm like, hey, I have like a bunch of, pages of a context or something I need to get summarized, or, maybe I'm looking at like a transcript or something where I'm like, okay, look, this transcript's like 4 hours long and I don't want to pay, a large amount of money to kind of send this to O1. I like to refer to these as the first tier. Then you have your second tier, which is like the more intelligent day-to-day usage model. So if you're using ChatGPT, if you're using Claude, you're using Gemini, the actual products use this sort of middle tier of models. And now this is the one that you're probably going to converse with. You're going to say, hey, how you doing? You're going to ask it all sorts of questions. And the majority of people are going to be in this tier. So you're using Claude, you're using GPT-4 or Gemini. Then we have the reasoning models. And sort of, these came out, I think, last month, maybe like 6 to 8 weeks ago. And right now, there's only 2 companies that have them. So you have ChatGPT and they have O1, O1 Mini, O1 Pro, and then you have Google with Gemini Thinking. So I split it into these 3 because the way that you use them is slightly differently. So I'm not going to dive too much into like how you would use the this first and second tier, because I think most people already use it. You ask it to help you write an email, summarize things. I wanted to throw in a little bit more into like how I craft and generate prompts with these reasoning models, because I do think there is a little bit of skill, and I say this very lightly. It's not like you need to have a PhD or anything. It's just more about knowing the right thing to say and how to phrase it to these models, especially O1 Pro, where it can just do things that like every day I'll be like, I can't believe there's this thing that I can pay, a company for so much a month. And it's like literally like having like this super intelligent, super smart coworker.
I love this. This is really cool. So for people following along on RSS, you should definitely go to the YouTube to check this out. Can I just make sure I'm following? I've used all these models, and the Gemini Thinking, is that Gemini 2.0?
Yes.
Is that the name? Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, Google has the most confusing naming for all their models.
The pricing and packaging of all these companies is like beyond a puzzle. Like it's like really bad.
Yeah, I think OpenAI, they skipped O2 and they just went straight to O3, and like Gemini, and then Claude with like their 3.5.6 V2. Like I don't know who on their teams there are naming these models. Really confusing, but Gemini 2.0 Thinking, which was, I think that came out I think that was the most recent sort of like thinking model.
That came out with their bundle where they had Deep Research, which is an incredible product. They had Flash. Like I thought that they had the Stream Real Time, which we did a video on that. I think that was one of the best. I think it was the first time Google stole OpenAI's thunder because they had the 12 days of shipments.
Yeah, I think that was up until that point, everyone had been sort of saying, OpenAI is kind of the company to beat with like real time. And then I think Gemini's real time did a really good job. I think that's because Gemini is natively multimodal input and output. So that means, for those of you who don't know, it means it can take in video, it can take in images, but can also natively generate these images and these videos, as opposed to other models where it'll generate text and then they'll have someone else, another AI model, take that text and convert it. So Gemini is native, meaning it can output text, it can output video. So that's why it's really good at like doing these sorts of like use cases.
Look, we all love ChatGPT. You've probably used it before. And if you haven't, stick around because you're going to want to listen to this. I've used AI a ton. I use ChatGPT for research, for writing. I use Claude to put guides together for whether I'm taking a trip or I'm working on a project at work. It's awesome. Well, I've got something that will make ChatGPT an even better experience for you. We've got this killer ChatGPT bundle that will take your prompting to the next level. It has over 100 prompts and a step-by-step guide to integrate it across your workflow. It is a total game changer. If you want it, I'll drop a link in the description below. Now let's get back to today's show.
Cool. So I would love to learn how you prompt then for the third category of LLMs, like the reasoning models. What is, like as Kip said, like what is like fundamentally different about using those models?
The main difference for using ChatGPT versus O1 Pro is that these models have to think. And sometimes they have to think. I think my record is I got to one to think for like 10 minutes. So you can imagine if you're waiting 10 minutes between prompts, you don't have that chance to sort of have this back and forth, right? You could do it, but that's really not what the models are built for. And you'll actually start to notice if you have a chat with O1 Pro, it actually will do worse than if you were to just sort of throw all of the text at it. And within prompt engineering, this is called sort of like one-shotting a prompt, which means you just sit there, and I've noticed that I do this myself, is I'll sit there for 5 to 10 minutes thinking of the prompt to ask. And I'll actually go and I'll consult Claude or I'll consult ChatGPT. Right. I'll have a conversation with it, and then I'll say, okay, given this whole chat, please create a prompt that I can give to O1.
This is exactly what I do. I'm glad you brought this up. This is exactly.
Yes.
This is an incredible tip for listeners.
Exactly, and I think one thing I will say, and I'm guilty of this, is I'm actually not good at writing prompts, and it's come to a point where I will just have a conversation with voice mode on ChatGPT, or I'll use Claude, and we'll just have a chat, and I'll say, okay, I am no longer writing the prompts, and this is actually something that is going to become more common. It's called meta prompting, where you no longer your request or the things that you type into the app no longer get sent directly to the model itself. There'll be a layer, an intermediary layer, which will try to decipher what it is that you're asking and then create a sub prompt that will go to it. And I think this sort of thing that I'm doing right now manually, and you guys are as well, is going to be done eventually. Like the companies will just do it themselves. And it's just because you can imagine in the future, if a model takes an hour and it takes maybe a day to think, you probably want to get that right piece of text. But yeah, that's sort of what I do in terms of just getting started. Is I'll go into Claude and I'll say, hey, and I actually have an example that I can walk you guys through, which is like one that I found pretty powerful, but it's a super useful workflow for like maximizing, and it's a lot simpler too, because you don't need to sit there and think about like, how do I articulate this prompt? So here's an example of how I've been using O1. I know a lot of people like to use it for coding and engineering, which I do, but I think that's the obvious use case. Like, sure, just, you give it a bunch of code. So what I've been doing is I've been deferring anything revolving my business around KPIs, metrics, like just anything I need to do around my business where I'm like, hey, I need another decision maker. I go to O1 and I go to O1 Pro. But the way that I do it is I start with GPT-4o. So I have got this scenario here that I have created, and I'm going to paste it into ChatGPT here. So I have a bunch of these metrics. So we can look it through. So for example, what I would do is I would maybe grab these from Stripe, or maybe you have like a analytics dashboard or something like that. And I'll kind of come in here and I have all of these metrics. So here, for example, these are obviously all made up. These are sort of my monthly active users, my daily active users. And you can see there's a ton of metrics that I will pull from some sort of like reporting dashboard. So what I want to do maybe, for example, is let's say I have all of these sort of things. I need to reduce churn. I need to increase sort of all of these various metrics here. So now here's this giant metrics field, right? So here I have this. Now, normally what you would do is maybe you would go into ChatGPT, you say like, hey, how can I optimize this? But the workflow I have is like a little bit different. So here are my metrics. And then I'll say, hey, I'm crafting a prompt to a smarter model than you. I want to optimize, 2 to 3 key metrics for this quarter. Now, craft a prompt I can send to this model that will give me a detailed report on how to do this. And I'll say, note, don't do this yourself.
Yeah.
The prompt.
Yeah, like so mean to poor 4o is getting slammed here.
Yeah, but you actually have to do that for all AI assistants. Like if you ask it for something, you say, please don't do this part, because it will just try to do the next part itself, right?
Yes, exactly.
Just to explain this to the listeners, Sully, what you're doing is basically using chat, 4o to basically craft prompt for O1?
Exactly. So I'm taking this, and a lot of the times, this is for this example, like I have like maybe even slightly cleaner than usual numbers. Like what I'll do actually a lot of the times is I'll just literally copy the text on the page of my reporting dashboard and I'll throw it into O1. So it's even more unstructured. It's like really messy. And I'll come into here and I'll be like, here's all of this like just disgustingly raw, ugly data that are like some metrics that I care about in my business.
And you could even screenshot that too, right? For people watching, there's a bunch of different ways you could get that data in here. That's really easy.
Exactly. And the key note here is that you're not throwing this into O1 right off the bat, because you might have a dashboard and there's like 3 screens. So that would be 3 screenshots. And like, the whole idea is to make this as easy as possible. So I would just dump all of the data that I care about into ChatGPT. So I was like, here, just take all of this. You can upload files. But the key thing here is we want to make sure that we have the right prompt with all the information to send to O1. So here, let's read what it says. Okay. So right off the bat, it says a breakdown of the strategies, potential experiments, or initiatives to implement. Like, I'll be honest with you, it would have probably taken me like to craft this prompt really nicely and this articulate probably would have taken me like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't even know what to ask. And that's the nice part is if I'm here and I'm just chatting with GPT, I can say, hey, can you improve the prompt like this? Can you improve it like that? And it gives you this ability to go back and forth without waiting. And I'll show you why you need to do that, because once you take this prompt, take this, and let's go ahead and actually throw that directly into O1. So we'll go here, we'll go to O1. So I use O1 Pro. I use O1 Pro mode. And
so O1 Pro is the $200 a month?
Yes. And some people ask me, what's the difference between O1 Pro? To be honest, I don't know the very specific technical details. But from my personal experience, I've compared O1 and O1 Pro. And I found that the nuance and the ability to sort of decipher what it is that you're asking, especially if you have a large piece of text or documents, O1 Pro is just a cut above the rest. Like it genuinely does feel like a person. At some point, I was just like, is this someone behind the scenes like doing this? Like, I was just like, and I would compare them like side by side, and I would be the same prompt, same everything, and the nuance I think was what got it for me, where it would say like, okay, you could do this, but potentially this could cause this, which means you should do this. Whereas like O1 would just be like, just do this. And personally, I mean, I don't know about you guys, whenever I'm trying to get like an answer to a difficult question, I want pushback. I want to know like, what are the caveats? And Pro mode was the only model I've ever tried that did that. So
it proactively pushed back without you having to say like, find flaws in this and debate with me and why I'm wrong.
Yes, so it would give the nuance into like what are the different things. And now I'll show you how I would do that. So you could prompt it, which is like more likely to happen, or you can just let O1 think. But okay. So I have this prompt, right? It says, if I were to break down to the structure, it's like I'm working on a SaaS business. I got my metrics, and I'm just going to paste this right off the bat just because to show you guys how easy it is. Okay, so goal is to provide keyword. All right, cool. Now it's going to go out and think. And this is actually the boring part. Where it's going to think for a undisclosed amount of time. So we'll let it go ahead and do that. Yeah.
It's continuing to think. When you think about your usage here in that you are using O1 Pro, I suspect you are similar to us. You are a power user of AI. You're using all of the different models for different things. Is this now, have you like collapsed all of your usage into this single model? Or do you still find like I find Claude better for a range of things? Actually, it's interesting. Like we had a Scott who runs the product team for Claude, and I was trying to describe to him, outside of like it's a better writer, it's a better communicator, like why I love Claude. It's a little bit like why I like one of my friends versus another friend. I just like it better. Like I just like hanging out with Claude. Like, what's your usage look like? Is this your only model, or how do you think about the different models?
I think I'm on the same boat as you. So Claude is by far a better writer. Just sounds a lot more human. I like to converse, like you said it. Yeah, so I'm on the same boat as you. My usage is very interesting, where I'll use ChatGPT when I want to use web search, just because it's just like, okay, cool, it's fast. And then I'll use it for like voice, just because it's a little bit easier. But basically, I've split it into like 3 categories. So the thinking and stuff goes to ChatGPT. All of these like really difficult analytical things, right? So this is a pretty analytical thing. Here's all these metrics and all these like data points. Please analyze it. For things like writing, for things like emails, for things like, just I want to chat with an AI about something, I'll go into Claude. And I use Claude a lot as well because I like to still code a ton. I'll use it for coding, and that's a whole separate workflow. So I would say that it's still very much so like 50-50 in how I use Claude and how I use ChatGPT. But I would say ChatGPT O1 Pro, analytical things. I want to talk to someone with a conversation and just maybe enjoy my time. I'm going to go to Claude.
Nothing for Google.
So for Google, the way that we use Google, I use it for multimodal things, but I don't really use multimodal that much. And at our company, I will use the model for a lot of the tasks. I think when I was mentioning the 3-tiered system, so we use Gemini more than actually all the other models in terms of pure tokens because it's the cheapest and it's the smartest. Price.
Kip and I have been using Gemini enterprise seats, and they are dope. Because they're plugged into your email and your G Suite.
Google Gemini with my G Suite wrote my performance review in like 30 seconds, and it was great.
Yeah, it's dope.
It's like
maybe that's the one part I haven't used it in, which is the G Suite integration, which I guess is really powerful now that I think about it. The reason is that one time I was getting it to write an email for me, and it like accidentally. I like wrote an email and I was like trying to edit it and it like sent it and the email was like I was like it was not like the best written email and I was like oh no. It was like to someone important. I was like no.
It's flaky. I will say it has some incredible G Suite. Like one of the incredible use cases was, and we're probably going to do a little video on some of the use cases. Is you can basically say I was doing this week like aggregate all of the Google Docs that I've been tagged in. Put all of the comments in different topics and then craft replies because I lose track of all the kind of comments that I'm getting tagged in G Suite and I can see the comments in Docs and then it has access to your email. So you can say, well, show me all of the emails this week that mention the same topics so I can collapse all my comms and aggregate them together.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
It's some pretty interesting use cases.
That's good. That's actually an interesting one that I hadn't thought about because I've been using it on sort of like the write and help me, but you're using it sort of more on like I have like a bajillion different things that are coming in and like I need that agent in front to like sort of be my first layer of defense.
A comms assistant. I think most knowledge workers need a comms assistant.
I'm pretty sure I might just go after this this and just go set it up on my end because I need that.
All right, your prompt is back.
Yes, let's see, it's back. Let's see. Oh man, see, so here.
Oh geez. It's like a McKinsey report over here.
I know, and I've had it think for like 7 minutes once, which was like actually blew me away. But when that was like a record, and it's funny because it thought for 7 minutes, and the answer was like four lines. But okay, I'm gonna read this, and I don't want to read too much of it because like this is literally like a report. So here it says it gives me below is a structured prioritized action plan. It's broken down by metrics, initiatives, and sort of all the things that I asked for it initially. I was like, okay. So reducing the churn from 6.5 to 4.5. Onboarding initiatives. Develop a more personalized, guided onboarding experience that highlights the core product value immediately. Implement walk tour tours. Okay, it's not a bad idea. And then it actually gives me the KPIs. Okay, so provide personalized emails and notifications triggered by user behavior. I'm sure you guys know this is actually a really good way to sort of, you're good. Okay, 7-day retention, onboarding percentage of complete. Okay, so it even tells me the KPIs that it's going to optimize for. So it's going to optimize for the 7-day retention, and it's to kind of reduce that first month churn. All right, and it even gives me like where I need to go.
This is so good. Remember like when you used to have a search query like this and you used to have to like try to aggregate information from 100 blue links and people think search isn't dead? Like basically your prompt is a search query, right? Like, but you can just do more advanced search queries. And it just gives you back an entire like guide. It's the cross-functional stuff is pretty great. Like it's called out. Wild. I'll let you call it out, but like if you could just call that part out, so our listeners could like what it's actually put down for cross-functional. Like it's actually teams right. But the one I'm looking at is the fact that it's figured out customer success for training materials.
And this was like an example that I kind of crafted before this, where it was like, okay, here's like some metrics. It gets even more powerful when you give it more context. So, in the context of my company or in the context of your team, like the more context you throw, the better these models do it. Like I have yet to run into a scenario where it didn't blow me away. Like very few times. And I would look back and I'd say, oh, where did this model mess up? And I actually realized I asked it the wrong thing. Like I gave it the invalid metric or I gave it something that was conflicting. And I would be reading it and I'm like, why did it say it? Is this model not smart? And I was like, oh, wait a minute. It's because like I said one thing at the top of my prompt and then I said something that like completely contradicted it. And this actually noticed that I contradicted myself, and it would say like, hey, like, you know, you said this, and then you said this, so I'm going to go ahead and take like this guess because I couldn't really figure it out. So very rarely has it made mistakes. But yeah, like this is like a pretty long report because it's like, okay, give me the customer success. I don't want to go through all of this because this is like a very, very large report. Okay, but like increasing strategy initiatives, upsells and cross-sell campaigns, that's actually really good idea.
That's a really good idea, actually. Upsell and cross-sell campaigns. One of the things it's called out is to segment customers by usage patterns, because heavy users are more likely to need advanced features. That is quite nuanced. That's not typical.
You got to really know a lot about SaaS to understand that.
Yeah,
actually.
You have to that's not a typical like average, read the average like guide and get that. There's some nuance to actually that.
What I want to do, and I want to show you guys the difference. I'm going to throw this into Claude as we're continuing to read, and we can compare it. So I'm going to paste this here directly into Claude, and while that's running, we'll just continue to read through. And I wanted to show because I think you'll read this, you'll be like, all right, this is cool. Like, can't other AI apps do it? And then you'll read the response from another model and you'll say, okay, wait a minute. Like, I just want to read the headings because I think there's, increasing the conversion rate from 3 to 5%. A/B testing, continuously experiment using Google optimize lead KPIs. Okay, see here, reducing the friction. All right, these are actually all like pretty good SaaS things to know, right? You know,
yep. And they're all right, by the way. Someone who's
these are all the things you would be doing.
These are actually all correct.
If you had no clue how to do any of this stuff, you could just go and build a plan.
Actually, I haven't seen a thing that it's got wrong yet, if I'm being honest.
Let's see here. Personalized lead nurturing and retargeting, drip campaigns. Okay, yeah, that's
also right.
It's got retargeting for abandoned signups.
Kieran is like, oh my god.
I actually. This is pretty mind-blowing.
You're ready to move to Spain and retire?
I would say if I set this up as a use case for I've hired a lot of growth people. If I set this up as a use case, like a practical example or a practical like working case as part of the interview process, and I asked that person to come back with a plan, I suspect this is like way above average of what I would get back, which is kind of like pretty and I know like the additional thinking time is, and I might make myself look stupid because I was like doing a ton of digging, but I've read so much AI stuff it might just fall out my brain. But like the additional thinking time allows it to bring back a bunch of answers and then and have additional time to like filter through for the correct one, which is why it's getting you above average and better nuance. But it's the nuance actually, like the when I look at the headlines, like landing page conversion rate, interactive product tours and tutorials, accelerated onboarding and quick win checklists. Like they're all things I think you could get from like best in class blog post, but it's the actual tactics in there, the how, that it's got some real nuance and things that you would not normally get from just like the average, which is like usually it will just return the average.
Yeah. So let's actually see. Okay. I think this is done. Okay. So this is, okay. So like, let's just compare this. So I'm just going to compare the length of what I've got. Okay. I don't know if you guys can see how much I'm scrolling here.
It's a lot of scrolling.
This is a lot of scrolling. We go to Claude. And by the way, Claude is a great model.
Great model.
And it's done.
I love Claude so much. So, and this is the same prompt. Like, this is not me, like, changing the prompt. And I think it's when you compare the two, you'll start to, like, say, like, okay, wait a minute. Like okay, trending, let's see, trend reduction, 6 point to 4%, whatever, with your strong enhanced onboarding. Okay, so let's say, which makes sense. Like, I think this is also what ChatGPT said, but let's actually just read the difference. So it's just the granular detail that it gives me, right? Like, okay, sure, set up early disengagement, but then here, it just gives me like very specific direction and like more nuance on what to do. And like, just to show, okay, so here, Claude gives me one bullet point. I'm like, okay, set up early warning systems, right? Here, it just it's just so much more in depth. And like here, okay, that gives me this for the 3. And I think it stops at this, right? It stops at point 2. This, like the second point, like here's the second point. And then it gives me the third point. It's
night and day.
It's night and day. And like, I think a lot of people say like, oh, you know, how would you use O1 versus like, I hope to anyone that's watching this, if you can expense O1 Pro, because it is expensive, I would say that if you're doing anything revolving analytical, like anything that revolves like just heavy thinking and reasoning, and I know that the term gets thrown around. I like to define it as something that like you can give to a person. I would defer everything to O1 Pro. Because like, again, Claude is still really good to chat about things and like have that quick back and forth, because here it thought for, whatever, 2 minutes and something, versus here is like right away. But the difference is just night and day for me personally. And I notice this in anything that I use, whether it's coding, whether it's sort of like even like writing different things. I will say the one thing that I've noticed is that it's not the best writer.
Exactly. I was going to say that it's not good for creative tasks. I found the same thing.
Yeah.
The reasoning models aren't, the thinking models aren't actually, they're actually worse, I think.
Yes.
So you would take this plan and put it into something like Claude and have it
write the memo,
do all the writing of the memo and how you're going to communicate it and everything. Is that right?
So like maybe actually, and maybe this is a good way to show like how I would do that, because there is a little bit of a like trick to sort of prompting it the right way. Because I wouldn't take this whole output and paste it into Claude. I would basically like segment it, if that makes sense. So I would take this, like, let me just walk you through what I would do if I was like, okay, I want to maybe write like an internal memo to send to my team for each of these sections, right? I could go here to ChatGPT and say, okay, for each, and maybe we can actually do this for each section, starting by the first one, write an internal memo to each team so I can send it to them. Let's just say it for now. We'll ask ChatGPT to do this. And then I'll just take this whole output, which is a lot to paste. Oh my God. I'll copy it and then I'll take this. So I'll have to do a little bit of sort of prompting here. And this is a good live example of how I prompt. I sort of transfer between the two models. So it's like, I have these metrics and I'll paste those metrics, metrics like this. And I'll paste that metrics and I got a response from a super smart model here. Smart thinking analysis. Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Sometimes Claude will do that text thing. Yeah. So I'll go back into here. I'll like paste these metrics and then I'll be like, okay, cool. And now for each section, help me write internal memos I can send to my team. We'll leave this here. Start.
By the way, this is days worth of work in like 20 minutes. By the way,
while I'm on like the podcast and I'm trying to like make sure the screen is recorded, like I'm not even paying attention to this, right? So here
oh my God, picking dates and everything. Yeah, Claude. We did a quick video as Claude using Claude projects to build yourself an executive assistant. It's actually a great task manager. You see the way it's starting to plot out deliverable dates.
Yes,
it's like that's another thing you didn't ask for. Like, I'm sure they're not correct, but it's pretty good at that stuff if you start to use it as like a task manager.
Yeah. So and one thing too, I will actually say here for how I prompted it. What I noticed is if you might say like, okay, hey, write me an internal memo for all of these sections. What you want to do with any models, you want to like break it down into as many sort of specific tasks as possible. So here I said, only do it for the churn reduction initiative. It looks good. I can iterate and I'd be like, okay, looks good to me. Move on to the next. And you can obviously like iterate it here. And it's already like, while this is running, this thing is still thinking, right? So it just shows that there's like the nuance in like how you can use one and how you can like sort of like take the output of one and throw it into the other. And like you said, like, I don't actually know how many hours of work this would quantify as and how many dollar values, like, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably more than 200 a month, right? Like this.
Way more than 200 a month. Way more than 200 a month.
So here it gave me a memos team. I'm really curious to read the difference. And I just want to see. So to answer your question, I've done that before. I've done this. I don't know where it is, but I've taken the entirety of our company docs and I translated it to a single, I think, 50,000 token document. And I took that document and I said, here's what you need to know about the company. Every little detail is in this giant document. And I didn't actually take this to 4.0. I took it straight to O1 Pro. And I said, just have at it. And I said, give me like, I had all these things I wanted to know, these initiatives. I wanted to know like landing page copy. I wanted to know like just everything. And it just thought for like 8 minutes and it just gave me this giant output. And again, it is one of those models where I think a lot of people will use will use like ChatGPT to upload files. I think that's a really common use case.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed in my personal experience is that a lot of the models, they can't reason over large text files. So if you throw, for example, 1 million tokens or like, let's just say 20 pages into Gemini, it'll be able to answer questions, but it will never, ever be able to, air quote, reason or think.
Right.
It'll never be able to look at all of the data and really internalize what it means. The only model that I've found that has been able to genuinely like, here is everything you need to know about my company, please do this for me, is O1 Pro specifically. And you'll see a lot of companies say, hey, 2 million contacts, 4 million contacts. It has this thing called needle in the haystack. For those of you who don't know, it's like, how good can a model, if you give it like 10,000 pages or whatever, how good can it pinpoint like the thing? And you'll see these benchmarks and these reports, and they'll say, hey, it's the best. But you actually use it and you're like, well, yeah, I guess it could like control F in like 2 sentences, which is somewhat useful. But if you really genuinely want it to do analysis, like nothing comes close to O1 Pro.
Your pitch would be like, if you have data analysts in your company and you like $200 is a tiny amount to pay for the additional power you get here. Like any serious company that's doing any type of research analysis,
right?
Yeah.
I think every single analyst, the C-suite, like they should have this, and they should find someone to grab all of the data and put it into a giant text file for them. Like that should be a role in and of itself. I don't know if there's an agent that maybe can do that.
I fundamentally believe like chief of staff is a great role, but a chief of staff really today should just be someone who actually has these tools and are like the chief of staff should be completely powered by AI, right? Like that's what the chief of staff can do is like do all the market analysis, make sure all of these things are getting done, and all of that should be done by AI.
And then there's no reason not to, because it's not like it's a difficult thing, and you're able to just get so much more leverage. Like the one thing I think that not a lot of people have been maybe speaking too much yet on sort of maybe the marketing side or sales side is because there's still a little bit of a learning curve. But what I've seen, because, again, we're engineering focused company, is that on the engineering side, using the same models, right? O1, Claude, we've probably been able to, I'm not exaggerating here, 5x our output as a team. Like, we're a small team, and it probably feels like we have 5x the headcount, and we're moving at 2x the speed because, we have smaller team members. Everyone is able to know what they need to work on, and they're just sitting in here with Claude or Cursor or whatever AI tool. And I think this year will be the year where I think outside of the engineering side of things, people will start to see the value, because they'll be like, wait, like this literally took me like a week, would have cost tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting here and I'm like just talking to this like computer interface, and it's doing all this work. So I think this will be the year for where outside of engineering, a lot of teams will see like immense value from the analytical side, because we've seen a lot of people using it for like copywriting. But I think the analysis side is where, these thinking models are able just to like, just do things that, again, I just looking at the comparison between Claude and O1, like, I don't know how else to phrase it, but
no, it's a huge difference. Yeah, it's a huge, I think that was one of the best like comparables. If anyone wants to see why I would want to pay for this, I think just looking at that side by side is pretty great. This has been a super great episode to like look at the power of O1 Pro. I think our listeners are going to love this.
Kieran and I are both going to go buy O1 Pro right now. And,
we can slack in when you be showing
us. Sully, thank you so much for joining us. This was, I love the framing to start too. Super clear on the difference between the different models. I think this is going to be great for everyone. If you have any questions, pop those in the comments below. Give us a like and a subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me on X, Sully Omar. That's most of the places that I post on, and I like to talk about all my prompting, engineering, and all those kind of stuff. So that's where the place to follow me.
This data is wrong every freaking time.
Have you heard of HubSpot? HubSpot is a CRM platform where everything is fully integrated.
Whoa, I can see the client's whole history, calls, support tickets, emails, and here's a task from 3 days ago I totally missed.
HubSpot. Grow better.